Awesome. Sammy, how are you, man?
Yeah, not too bad. You hear me okay? You see me okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The beard looks great. Hat looks great. You're good.
Yeah, thanks. All right.
I want to start you off with the hardest question possible. So, Elimination Chamber, this will air next week. So, coming up on Sunday in your hometown of Montreal, uh, Chris Hanna and Laura Jane Grace both offer to play you in as you come out for your world championship match. So, against me or Propagandy, who are you picking?
Oh, that is a tough question. I thought you were going to start me off with a softball here.
No, the hardest
I,
question I got.
I don't know. I didn't know that Chris Hanna had said that actually.
Yeah, I'm making it up for him, but I'm sure he'd love to.
Oh, okay, okay. Unverified source.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know, man. That's a toughie. See, I'm thinking put your hands together, and that collaboration could be something
Wow.
special. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You get a little comply resist with you used some against me quote the other day. Um, yeah, you'd be golden. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. So on the serious note, how are you feeling? This is a pretty big event in your hometown of Montreal, Elimination Chamber World Championship match for you. I'd imagine there's a lot going on for you inside.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty insane, I guess, when you stop and think about it. Pretty surreal when you stop and think about it. But at the same time, if you just look at kind of what's happened over the last year, it's kind of not that insane. So it's this weird thing. Like if you had asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, of being lined up here, it would have seemed crazy. But if you started asking me 2 or 3 months ago, it would be crazy to not be here. You know what I mean? So it's a weird thing that you just get to a point where where it's not only is it not crazy, it seems perfect. Like it seems like a perfect fit. It's like the stars just align just right to where this is the next natural thing that people want to see happen, and it just lined up so perfectly with Montreal.
It's pretty crazy how organically it all came together. And for our listeners, I want to take them back a little bit. I think it was last April the first time you kind of interacted with the bloodline when you were doing your locker room leader character and that arc, and it was months until you actually were on screen with Roman and working with Roman. I think that was August when you guys were in Montreal or whatever it was. Take me through a little bit of how this all picked up steam, because I think I remember hearing you talk to Ariel Hawani about how, yeah, you thought this could be a thing, but maybe not this big. And now, like you said, it's the most obvious thing at this point.
Well, so it's not that I didn't think it could be this big, because in a way I kind of did, but I also didn't. I just didn't think it would actually be seen through. That's the bigger surprise. Like the idea as a concept, I knew would work, and I knew that if we would do it right, it could be huge, and it could lead pretty much to this exact moment. And I even articulated that to a handful of people. I didn't go around saying, yeah, and then it ends with me and Roman for the title, because you can't really put that in your pitch because it sounds like, okay, we see what you're after. But in the back of my head, there's only a handful of people I articulated that to, wherein I was saying something to the effect of, and if it's done right, it could even spawn the babyface turn and line up, this way. So it's not to say that the end game was completely unimaginable, because I did imagine it. But the fact that it happened is the more surreal thing, because of the number of variables that need to kind of fall into place for things to happen right. Uh, it's almost immeasurable, and so it happened. The fact that it happened is almost crazier than anything, and
Sure.
happened so well. And it did exceed my expectations. And I'm not saying, hey, like I'm some visionary genius who like laid out the whole thing, and everything you've seen on TV has all been part of this brainchild of mine, because there's a lot of little things in there that I just didn't see coming. And sometimes this is something I certainly learned. It's something you already know in theory, but in executing a long-term story like this, I learned it on a much more real level, where the execution on any given week can spiral the story into a whole new direction that you just didn't see coming or you could not have predicted. And sometimes it just comes down to how the thing, even if you had it in your head, oh, this week, uh, me and him will get into it and this will be the end result. But then when you actually go out and do it, it carries a different emotion, or there's a different fan reaction. There's so many things that could just, whoa, that did not play exactly how I thought it was going to play. Well, and now we're here. What about this thing we want to do? Whoa, I don't know if it applies anymore because now we're here.
Right.
So there's been a lot of now we're here moments throughout this storyline.
And I imagine even something like, the Usi thing that caught on and ended up being merch and everything like that. And your hand towel at home,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's not like you could sit down 6 months beforehand and be like, oh yeah, and then I'll use Usi as a
yeah,
feeling,
yeah.
and it'll take off. So there's a lot of like organicness and authenticity there. I'm curious how that's been for you, because you kind of like the bloodline storyline has been going on. The Roman Reigns kind of head of the table storyline has been going on a long time. And there's this story that very much weaves into yours about Jey Uso and Roman Reigns as well. And the moment that you had at Royal Rumble with Roman and KO and the bloodline was, I think, almost as much about Jey as it was about you. What's it been like to kind of enter a storyline that you maybe weren't in from the very beginning, and now you're a huge part of the storyline? At least for right now, it's about you.
Well, so this is part of the beauty of this storyline that I only kind of realized maybe a month ago. Is like part of what makes this such a legendary storyline is that it's actually not one storyline. It's three or four really long stories culminating in this story. So like you have me and Kevin's story, you have Jay and Roman's story, you have the bloodline story, and then all of that is backed by legitimately decades of real relationships. In the case of me and Kevin, or the Usos and Roman that grew up together. So there's three or four stories all going on at once, and now they're all coming together in this one sort of master story, where the reason it works is because, oh, I remember this from 2 years ago with these guys, and oh, I remember this from knowing that these guys are friends for the last 20 years, and all these things had to come together, or it's just not the same story. So it's a really strange. I don't even know what to compare it to. It's almost maybe like Better Call Saul, where if you saw Breaking Bad, like you could watch Better Call Saul on its own and it would still be great. It's a great show. But if you saw Breaking Bad and you're seeing all the callbacks and now you're understanding things about the first show that makes sense now that you're seeing the prequel, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's a story on top of a story. And that makes the story is good enough on its own. If you just tuned in and you don't know the background, it's a compelling enough story to get you into it on its own. But I think our fans like being rewarded for paying attention. I think they like continuity. I think they like seeing things called back. So when you get a great story, and on top of that, it also rewards the fans who've been paying attention for all these years, and now they can appreciate the story on an even deeper level. That's when you hit something, I think, kind of magical, which is what I think we've stumbled upon here.
It certainly seems that crowd reaction at the Royal Rumble, and I'm enjoying the heck out of it, and really excited to be at Elimination Chamber for that event and see what the crowd reaction is like. So there is that. Hey, it's a good story. It's several good stories. There's this reward long term. What else do you think it is that's helped this connect so well with not just audiences, but you guys are getting praise from everyone around the wrestling industry, people who are normally curmudgeonly and don't like to give credit to anything. Like obviously you're doing a great job in your role. Roman's doing a great job in his, but there are lots of storylines where guys do a good job. And this one has just seemed to connect on a slightly, not even slightly, a higher level period. what goes into that? Is that your natural connection with the live audiences, your natural connection with this storyline where, your character right now is kind of real life Sammy turned up to 11 or 12? Or do you even think about it, or just kind of, roll with it?
No, I do think about it a lot, but I don't have I've yet to articulate the answer or put my finger right on what it is, because I don't know that it's any one specific thing that you can just nail. Like even this thing I'm talking to you about a moment ago, where I'm saying this is 3 or 4 stories all making this one sort of master story. That was kind of a realization I had only a couple of weeks ago, and we're almost 10 months into this story. So I think it's one of those things in hindsight that maybe one day I'll be able to just say, you know what it was? It was this. But I think part of why I can't give you a one sentence answer is because is the answer itself, is that there's a level of complexity to it as well that I don't really think you've seen, without sounding arrogant here, but I don't think you've seen it in any other storyline in wrestling ever. Like this level of like little details and nuance, and it's we've conditioned the audience to start looking for every little detail. Like somebody's eyes shift in the background when somebody says something, and now fans got to go, "Oh, did you see that? That's gonna be something," because now that they realize they have to pay attention to this stuff on a bit of a deeper level. So I think complexity is one part of it. But then there's some obvious parts too, which is I think we're all pretty good performers, and then we all have this really good chemistry with each other. Um, both off screen before all of this started, we all have a lot of respect for one another, and then on screen, we all seem to have a great chemistry with one another too. And the fact that there's so many different dynamics at play, and each relationship, there's a number of players. You're talking about seven, maybe seven characters here, and each two characters have a different relationship. So that's just fun. And then the nature of my relation, my character, is so off color from the rest of them that that's inherently kind of entertaining. So I think that's also brings you in easier before you get to the nuance and the complexity and the little touches that we're trying to do. The sheer contrast of me with these guys is entertaining enough to kind of make you go like, what is all this about? What's that guy doing there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Kind of
So
to
there's
go
like,
back to your Breaking Bad parallel, it's like, yeah, it doesn't work without Saul being this at first blush a guy who's not that objectionable, not he's just like slippery Jimmy, or whatever they call him in the
yeah,
early
yeah,
years.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, you can come to that a little bit. With the character stuff that is a little over the top. How much you get a kick out of when you watch something back and you see you broke one of the guys?
That I mean that but that was a huge part of it. Actually, that was also a huge part of fans, I think, falling in love with the story. Like fans appreciated the story, but then there was this little time period around September, October, when things started getting really fun. It wasn't just a good story; it was also fun. And things got, I think, a little more dramatic around November and December and onwards. But that's another thing about the story in its totality that's been so cool, is like there's different chapters. The beginning's like kind of introductory, and I'm kind of trying to get my foot in the door and like, haha, whatever. And then I get my foot in the door and it changes things a lot. But then for that couple of month period where we're all kind of on screen together and they're cracking and stuff like that, it was just so fun. And that's not nothing. That's, you can't just discredit that. That was a huge part of, I think, fans falling in love with the story. Is like, man, there's something here, and like these guys are having fun clearly. And look, you can't even keep it together, and that's not something you really see in wrestling. We do a really good job of keeping it together. We have to keep it together for the sake of, that's what the business is. The business is keeping it together so that you can suspend your disbelief and buy in. It's very rare we break the fourth wall in that way. Uh, and I really kind of can't even recall ever, like a handful of times ever seeing it. Like I
And
think I
usually it
remember
was when
kind of,
someone's messing up. not just
Yeah,
being
yeah,
hilarious. Yeah.
yeah. It was just, anyways, all this to say, I don't want to go into all that, but all this to say that part of it actually helped take the story to another level. When people saw that, like, oh, there's, you know, they fell in love with it at that point. That's when I think it kind of went to the next level.
So we've gone through the kind of beginning of this story. We've gone through the fun aspect, and you said it got a little more dramatic around November, around December. It obviously culminates, or at least to this point, it hits this big moment with you in the bloodline where Kevin Owens, who you guys have said to each other at that point, look, we've been through the indies together. We grew up in the same areas. We have fought each other. We've teamed together. We're done with each other. I don't want to fight you. I don't even want to see you. The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. Like, just get out of here. But then your story is so weaved into his because of his story with Roman. Take us through what that moment is like for your character, who has, finally gotten this acceptance from the bloodline and is looking over at a former friend who you thought was no longer a friend. Like, how much of that moment for you is the realization of what Roman had become and what he was trying to use you? How much of that was about you and Kevin? Take us through that moment for your character.
Are you talking about specifically the Royal Rumble moment here? Or
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, well, so but again, I think there's a lot of elements at play here because Kevin is woven into the story quite a bit, um, and only becomes a really focal part around November. But he shows up once or twice even before then, where he's kind of telling me like, okay, enough with this stuff, man. You're not one of them. Come hang out with me. And I'm like, hey, man, I've got a good thing going here, you know. So he kind of shows up once or twice before all that, and then uh, if he's not the guy, so there, I don't know. I don't. I feel like this is something I should pull the curtain back on 10 years from now when we're totally done this story. But um, Kevin's involvement was a point of contention as far as how much and when. Okay, especially with me and Kevin because we're hypersensitive to the fact that we've done so much together and on screen in WWE together that we're delicate about how we're used together because we don't want fans to ever get sick of this. And it's challenging. It's challenging to constantly keep something you've been doing for 20 years for fans to be not only say to themselves, uh, not only not be to the point where they're saying, "Oh, this again," but to make them actually be okay with it. Never mind being okay with it, but excited to see it. Even though these are two guys they've seen together across the ring from each other literally thousands of times, and you still get them excited. That's very, very, very hard to do. So we're very conscious about how much we're involved with each other, when and where, and if we're going to come together on screen or opposite each other on screen, when, how long for, how do we not beat it into the ground? These are all things that are kind of on our minds. Um, so all this to say, now knowing where we are right now at this point in time and seeing the success of War Games and seeing the success of the Royal Rumble, it's painfully clear that it couldn't have worked out any better, and it had to be Kevin at that time. And it was just crucial. It was crucial because if it was anybody else who was beating up, if it was any other contender that stepped up to the plate, like Drew McIntyre or Sheamus or Riddle or anybody, it doesn't have the same context for me to interject when Roman's about to put the death blow, or it doesn't have the same context when I betray this person at War Games to prove my allegiance. It just doesn't pack the same power. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it had to be Kevin, and it had to be done there and there, specifically at the Survivor Series and at the Royal Rumble. Um, so that's why it was so effective, in my opinion. But well, I mean, that's not, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out, but it's obvious, right? If it's anybody but
Hmm.
Kevin, it just doesn't work. But because of the 20-year history with Kevin, but also that 6-month history, that's why it worked so well for me to interject and for the character to have this sort of crisis. But also part of it is that Kevin also put that in his ear, the character, right? He said to me,
Mhm.
they're going to use you and they're going to turn on you. So he plants a seed of doubt. And then when push comes to shove, that voice starts kind of talking to you, right?
Mhm.
Or talking to me at that time. So even that's a complex thing. On the other side of it, if we ever, get face to face after that, it becomes like, man, you ruined it. And he's like,
Mhm.
no, I was right. They used you, just like I said. And I'm like, yeah, but that all happened because you planted the seeds of doubt. So it's like two pretty valid arguments
Mhm.
going back and forth between two former friends. So I don't know. It's simple but complex. I'd say, again, that summarizes the whole story and the success of the story. It's simple yet complex.
And the fascinating thing for me with you and Kevin is not only did he plant that in your ear, not only do you have this thing where, like you said, you both have a very justified case, right? He's saying I was right, and you're saying, well, no, that only happens because of you. And if it wasn't for you, it wouldn't play out that way. And you also have this element of, yeah, maybe Kevin's right, but Kevin has done that to you. Like his character has done that to your character multiple times. If you go back to your pre WWE history, a whole bunch of times he's been
Right.
that guy. Now, part of me is like, okay, well, who better to know that that's coming than someone who has done it themselves and can put themselves in Roman's head. But you can feel for your character in those moments that there is this level of distrust, and it's not even clear from the Royal Rumble, and I'm sure this will play out over the coming months and years. Is that a reconciliation of you and Kevin, or is that just about you and putting the foot down? Obviously this is you against Roman on Sunday, but it's in Montreal, and you and Kevin have this history in Montreal. Obviously, you can't give much away. But how much of your story from here do you feel is going to be about exploring whether that moment is something you and Kevin reconcile around, or whether it's just about Sam?
I don't know because going back to what I said a little earlier in this interview, um, where you could kind of have something laid out in mind, but then by virtue of live performances and things taking left and right turns that you sometimes don't see coming, you find yourself in this situation saying, "Well, we're here now," and where we are right now, the exact time of this interview is, it could change next week. It could change. It's different from what it was last week, and it could change a lot next week. We're in this really, really uncertain time where even if I told you earlier in this interview, oh yeah, I kind of envisioned this whole thing and I kind of saw it playing out this way. And I kind of saw it like if it's done right, it could even lead to me and Roman and me kind of turning and all this kind of stuff. Okay. Even if that's true, and it's still not, we're here now. And I couldn't predict being exactly here, exactly now. So I don't know what's next. The only thing I know about here and now for sure is it feels like we're at that point in the movie where things are falling apart, things are coming together, and we're headed towards a resolution of some kind. I don't know what that is though, because I can see two or three or four very satisfying answers to how it ends, and I can also see two or three, four realistic ways where it ends that are not satisfying, which I'm concerned about. Also,
Mhm.
being a performer and part of this story and wanting to like stick the landing. Uh, but it's just such a unique thing where you're like, it's like a long term thing that you envision a year out, but at the same time, you're writing it as you go. It's like this weird long term story mixed with weekly improvisation and constantly having to rewrite on your feet. There's nothing quite like it. So I don't know where it's going exactly next, other than there's definitely a feeling in the air, which I think is kind of the most important thing, that fans feel the feeling in the air. So even when we're talking about the story in its totality, there's a certain lightness to the story at a certain point. There's a certain fun at a certain point. There's a certain drama at a certain point. There's certain feelings that we just want them to have at certain points in the story. And now I don't know the exact details and the specific beats of what comes next and where it all goes. All I know is right now we needed to start feeling, and we're there, like, oh boy, things are things are coming to a head. What that head exactly is remains to be seen. I think for everybody, even the players involved. So I can't tell you. All I know is we're headed towards something,
When you
and
talk
it's going to
about that,
feel like something when we're there.
yeah, it's going to, and that's where I wanted to go next. And I know I don't have you for that much longer, but this is going to be in Montreal. You have said before, the city is part of this story. It was where you first interacted with Roman on screen. It's where you debuted on the main roster. I believe it was your first wrestling show yourself that you went to was also in Montreal, the Montreal Screwjob.
Yep.
So, I mean, I heard Ariel, or I saw Ariel tweet the other week that he thinks this could be the biggest night in Montreal wrestling history. And, Montreal hasn't even had a pay-per-view since 2009. How special are you expecting Elimination Chamber? And sorry, I called it Sunday. It's Saturday. How
Yeah, have it.
special are you expecting this to be for you? Like, can you even put an expectation on it? Is it similar to your main roster debut when you knew it was coming? Like, are you getting the tingles thinking about it?
So it's a weird kind of thing going on here because on the one hand, part of the very reason we're doing this interview is to build excitement for this event. But I personally am trying to curtail that excitement for myself because I don't want to bank on it. I don't want to have overly high hopes. But all signs point to this is going to be insane. But for me personally, I just don't want to use that as a crutch and be like, "Oh, don't, it's fine. They'll be red hot anyway." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I have to approach it like it is a part of the story, and because it is, because it's Montreal. That's a huge part of the story, and I know historically how they've reacted to me. You mentioned my debut there against Cena, or even the last time I was there. They were, I was in a five-way match for the number one contender of the IC title, and I didn't even win the match or whatever, but they were crazy excited to see me. Uh, so I try not to uh, I just try not to expect it. I always go in kind of going like, this time is the time they might not be as loud. You know what I mean? This is the
Yeah.
time I just don't ever want to bank on it. And so, but at the same time, let's be honest here, it's probably going to be insane. It's probably going to be insane. Um, I don't know how it's going to go, but it's going to be memorable for sure. Very,
Um,
very memorable.
yeah, I can't wait. I have one more about your character. I wasn't able
We've
to
got a
find
couple of
this.
honestly,
Okay.
I'm done after this, so if you wanna take 5,
Oh,
10 extra minutes, I'm cool.
amazing. And then we could just talk about against me and propaganda after and stuff.
Yeah.
So with your character, obviously there's a connection with the audience, and Montreal's a separate thing because Montreal love you no matter what you do, and this is special because it's Montreal, but it's crowds outside of Montreal that have been connecting with you as well. And you do such a great job of, even when your character is being a bit of a dink, getting that buy-in from the crowd and that sympathy from the crowd. And I wonder how much that helps it play up when someone like Roman is in your character's arc and is, not treating you the best, maybe manipulating you. Maybe he's being earnest with all the apologies and walkbacks and stuff, but in all likelihood, he's manipulating you. And you have this long running relationship with Kevin Owens where he has done that at times. What do you think it is about the character that, first of all, kind of has this magnetic thing where he's drawn to people that maybe treat him that way, but also how you're able to maintain that level of audience sympathy, even though, there's a thin line between that and, hey, you're kind of doing this to yourself.
Right.
Do you think about that much?
Yeah, um, I think I think the character, and this even goes back to like my previous life prior to WWE and Sami Zayn and all that. I think the character sort of harnesses this thing that we all lost about ourselves, like the ability to trust and the ability to just be, uh, I don't know, present and trusting. Because you develop as you get older. When you're a kid, you kind of trust everything and everyone around you, and then little by little, that trust gets broken by people, and the world hardens you. And I think it's very refreshing and very endearing to see someone when you don't think that's really, they still have that. They've still managed to preserve that. I don't even want to call it naivete or like childlike wonder or childlike innocence, nothing like that. It's just the ability to still wear your heart on your sleeve, honestly, um, and still sort of, again, it's like a hard thing to even articulate and an even harder thing to convey. But I think fans are drawn to that. I think people are drawn to that. I think humans yearn and long for the ability to just be and just trust, and and they like seeing it in someone else. And when you see it in someone else, you like it. You're happy about it. And the character doesn't seem to really like tiptoe around it. Like, I'm in, let's go. Just buys it, you know what I mean? And buys in and acts accordingly. Uh, so one of the things that I think helped take the character from being a pretty disliked bad guy, even at the start of 2022 with Knoxville and this and that. And Knoxville, the whole thing with Knoxville gave some lightness to the character.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd go to these live events all over the country and get booed out of the building. Like, I was pretty disliked. And I think the thing that started turning it a little bit is that when I got in with the bloodline, I didn't change the way I acted. I didn't all of a sudden stop dancing and start, being as serious as they were or trying to act as cool as they were. I was still me alongside of them. And I think even that is what made people start to come around to it. It's like he's still him and he's not changing. He's not acting how he's supposed to be acting right now. And I think they find that kind of refreshing and endearing on like a subconscious level. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even if I am still acting brash or loud or saying arrogant things or whatever, um, the fact that it was unchanged or that I'm unchanging is inherently likable,
Mm-hmm.
whether they pick up on it or not. So I think that's part of it. I don't know if that was a long-winded answer to just
No,
say
that's
that.
great, man. I think, kind of authenticity is a part of it, but the heart on the sleeve part. And yeah, I mean, we're suspending our disbelief with this stuff, but also the
And
ability to kind of put your cynicism aside, right? And be like, hey, this guy doesn't have those, things weighing him down that we have day to day. He can just be in the moment and like truly the comfort level of your character being himself so truly in that situation. Like, that is the most stress. Like, you're plucked from your day job and dropped in the CEO suite, and you show up in a band t-shirt and jeans, and you're having fun and stuff, and
exactly,
everyone else is very serious. Like, it's a hard
it's
thing
inherently
to.
likable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think we all wish we could be, that authentic to ourselves no matter the situation.
right. So I
So
think that's been a big part of it. And the one other thing I just wanted to say there is there is an element of that in me as a human being, as a person, that I think also is why it translates into my character, why it seeps out in my character, because I genuinely do have a bit of that. I'm not like, uh, I won't get into too much detail about that in particular, but it exists authentically in me as a person, even still, which is why I think it seeps into the character.
yeah, I think that makes
Co-
sense. I
co-
think that.
part of it is a very conscious decision, but part of it
Mhm.
was probably unconscious decisions too, because it comes from a real place.
Hmm. Okay, so with the character, I know there's this level of trust and um, being yourself and being in the moment. So let's play out a scenario where you win the championship on Saturday, and Kevin Owens comes out to celebrate with you in Montreal, where you got, that's home turf for you guys. Does your NXT title win flash in your head, and what happened after
Well,
that biggest moment of your career to this point?
The character or me or
The
what? What are you
character.
asking me?
Sorry, yes, the character.
I think the character would actually. I think he would. I think he would go and he'd be in
Okay.
because
That's
because that moment, it's like a transcendental moment. You know what I mean? It's one of those moments like in real life, if you've been arguing with someone or whatever, but then something really serious happens and all the BS just gets put to the side
mhm.
because this trumps all of that. This transcends all of the pettiness. This is bigger. So because that would be such a monumental moment, even though yes, there's flashes of NXT, yes, we just told each other we dislike each other, we never want to see each other. In that moment, I think the character, at least on my end, would see this as something that transcends all of that, that trumps all of that, that's bigger than all of the pettiness, and would be accepting of a hey man, bring it in, give me a hug or whatever. Like
If
there might be a little leeriness too, but I think ultimately the moment would transcend all of that.
right. That's great. So I'll throw you one more and then I'll let you go. I started you off with a music question, and maybe this is a tough one and put you in a tough spot again. Is there a song or an album you've come back to in the recent parts of this story that obviously your music fandom is you as a person, but that tie what you're feeling as a character to your musical taste? Like I know you're a big music guy. I know that's a big inspiration for you. And I know I tend to do that. Like, oh, I'm in this situation. This album fits the feel, or this song fits the feel. Have you been going through that a little bit at all? And has anything stuck out to you?
So actually, normally I would say yes, I'm the same way. But as of late, it's a bit more cinematic than musical.
Hmm.
So I'm drawing more inspiration from even like, my favorite TV shows like Breaking Bad or The Wire that were long form stories that really episodic. I think I liken our story a bit closer to those TV shows than I do other TV shows that I've liked, just because of
Hmm.
the depth there. So I'm starting to see things a bit more in, oh, and this moment would be like this. And this moment would be like Avon and Stringer on the balcony. And this moment, oh, this is almost like, this is Goodfellas. And this is the usual suspects. And I'm starting to see things from movies that remind me more of where the character's at or where the dynamic between certain characters are at more than music. And it used to be like musical inspiration was a bigger thing. But for this particular story, because the story is so, I don't know, grand and I don't know, episodic and cinematic, that it's tending to take my mind more towards quality television and quality film than uh than music at the moment.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, I had to go from music quotes in my head to just every quote from The Wire now now bouncing around my head.
Yeah.
Trying to figure
Yeah.
out where Cody fits and all this and everything. And the Marlowe thing doesn't fit, but maybe eventually in the story. Sammy, I've taken up way too much of your time, man. Thank you so much
No,
for
no,
taking the
really, it's
time
okay.
out.
Don't worry about it.
Um, uh, before I let you, just for my purposes, do you want me to like, are you doing anything with Sammy for Syria right now? Like, would you like me to plug that when I set up this interview or come out of it or anything like that?
Yeah, if you would, that would be awesome, especially
Okay.
because there's been this earthquake
Yeah.
that's devastated the area where both the clinics are running.
Yeah. I
But
didn't
I'm
want to put
also
you
trying
on
to,
the spot in the actual interview, but yeah, I'm more than happy to push people to that and
yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm gonna get on a phone call with the lady that I deal with to just see about specific earthquake response at the moment.
okay.
But obviously, anytime we get donations or uh, eyeballs on the website or what we're doing with the clinics and all that, there's all there's always people that are hearing about it for the first time. So if there's anything to directing them towards that, especially in light of the earthquake, for sure it goes a long way, but no pressure.
No, I'll do that for sure. This won't be out until next week, but yeah, definitely I'll do that.
Yeah, I
Thank you so much
appreciate
for
that.
taking the time, man. I appreciate you giving me 40 minutes. I didn't mean to take up that
Yeah,
much of
yeah,
your
don't
time, but
sweat it.
this has been
Honestly,
great.
my last thing of the morning, so don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Time for
All right,
coffee
man.
number two
Appreciate
for
it.
me. So